Welcome to the Evolvepreneur AI Advantage Show, and I'm your host, Richard Wray. My mission is to help entrepreneurs understand AI and use it to their advantage. Join me today where we dig deep with our guest and get you the best concepts and strategies. Today's special guest is Ellis Crosby. Ellis is an AI specialized developer and the CTO of Scarlett Panda. Today we're talking about AI for personalized creative content. Ellis, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Really great to have you here, Ellis. And as I like to ask all my guests, where in the world are you?
I'm currently in Mexico City, in Mexico.
Now, you don't sound like you're from Mexico City originally. So are you traveling? Is this a holiday or are you actually working?
So at the moment we are full-time digital nomads.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I'm not originally from Mexico. I'm from the north of the UK, or the north of England to be specific. So my accent might come across a little bit rough on that part.
Don't worry about that. I'm from Sheffield originally. It's not our fault. It's okay. People will cope. Hey, man. Well, look, let's get into this then. So, Ellis, tell us a little bit about yourself because, you're from the north of England. That's cool. You're a digital nomad. And it sounds like you've got a bit of an interesting story of, how you've got into this life.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a background of, so I started out working in marketing, but I'm also a little bit of a nerd. So very quickly I switched over to anything technical or data related, worked as a marketing analyst for a long time. And that's where I got introduced into AI in building tools for marketers. And I like to tell people that I'm a veteran in this space because I used GPT before ChatGPT came out.
No, that's very interesting. So obviously,
yeah.
ChatGPT, it was November 2022, if I remember correctly, when it kind of broke to the public. But the concept of the GPT and AI had been around for quite a while before then, yeah?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So can you tell us anything about that early work? As you say, you were using AI for marketers. What were you doing at that point?
So mostly what I was doing was generating content for Facebook ads, Google ads, blog content, things like that. A little bit to classify images or classify text into categories. So yeah, mostly on the marketing side at that point.
And what sort of tools were you using at that point?
On the AI side, everything was, at least on the text side, everything was GPT. It was the only thing that had any kind of magic to it. And I was very amazed at that point. I think, like in today's world, people would look back and think that it's kind of dumb or kind of old school compared to the output you get from ChatGPT these days.
Yeah, no, I get you. I saw something just the other day where there's some talk of releasing GPT-2, not 4, but GPT-2, which wasn't originally released because it was too scary. So, things have come on quite a little bit.
Yeah.
So you've done some interesting things. Tell us about Scarlett Panda and this digital nomad lifestyle.
Sure. So Scarlett Panda, so in February 2022, I had a daughter,
Congratulations.
which thank you, which really changed a lot of my life. And I think that the main one is just where I've directed my my work time. So we started out being a digital nomad around September of 2022, and in October of that year, we were sat in a cafe. And my wife was working on the other side of the table, and I was sat with Scarlett, our daughter, and I was reading her this book. It was like a personalized book that my mum had bought as a gift.
Okay.
It was called Scarlett the Panda Saves the World.
Oh, I like it.
And the book itself was not that exciting. Like as with a lot of personalized children's books, they use a template, and the quality of the story doesn't really matter too much. Like the amazement and the happiness comes from the fact that it's personalized to a child.
And the interaction with the child and the parent or the person reading the story. Yes.
Exactly. But in this case, that meant that I'd read this subpar story for maybe the 200th time. As I was going through, I was thinking...
That doesn't stop for several years, by the way. This will continue, just so you know.
Well, we'll see if we can solve that with AI.
See if we can fix that problem, yes.
And it was around the same time that I was working with AI for blog content. And as I was reading this book, it just sort of hit me. I was like, wait, surely I could use AI to also make a children's story. And in doing that, I could have a fresh story, whenever I wanted to. And my daughter at that point was 6 months, so she didn't really care too much. It was more for my benefit of how fresh can I keep the story so that I can keep reading to her without getting bored. And yeah, we took the code from this marketing blog generator, repurposed it, give it a few extra functions, and it was generating stories for my daughter with cute little images that she appreciated. Yeah, and that was the beginning of it.
And so you took something that you'd worked with in your professional life, saw that it could be used in your personal life in a very constructive way, both to entertain your daughter and, by the sounds of it, to keep your sanity, trying to take on the problem that countless parents have dealt with over the years. And then you went, okay, let's turn this into a business.
Yeah. Well,
So what happened
originally it
there?
started. Oh, am I here?
Yeah, you still here?
Yeah.
Go away.
So originally we shared it with a few friends that had children. So around about that time, I was releasing products all over the place. Mostly, I was spending months building something that was never validated, making the old mistake that a lot of entrepreneurs do, where they spend a lot of money and effort making something, and then when they start selling it, realizing that no one wants it. So we decided to do it a little bit differently, and we just started sharing the tool for free with a lot of friends who also had kids. And this is pre-ChatGPT, so
Yes.
basically everyone was like, "Whoa, this is magic! Like, who is writing this story? How do you know about our kids? Like, this story appeared in 1 minute. That's not enough time for someone to have written this. It's crazy." But the piece, the insight that we got that really drove us on was we have one friend who has a daughter who has dyslexia, and usually at school when she's assigned reading, she's a little bit scared to read, so she's a little bit apprehensive, doesn't really go through her usual books. But with this tool, our friend found that she was playing with it for, I think, 2 hours. Like, she would put in her toys into the story, her friends. She would put all these ingredients in, hit run, and then she was excited to see what would happen in the story. So she would read through it, and we were like, okay, this is more than just some gimmicky little tool. This actually has the potential to also do some good in the world, to have a really good impact.
That's really interesting. So either the child or the reader, parent, guardian, whatever, can actually interact with this application to make the story truly unique. Yeah.
Yes. So every single story is created on the fly.
And so tell me about some of the things that can vary. You mentioned that, the little girl, she was in there, but she was starting to put her toys in there and maybe some friends and locations. How far can you customize this?
It's very, very flexible. And this is what's different from the usual templated personalized stories, where you can maybe add a couple of characters and change the appearance. Because we're using AI and because the story is generated completely from scratch, you can really put it in as many different directions as you want. You can add characters, you can add friends, toys, events, custom morals. It's very, very flexible.
So does it also have a memory so that if events have happened in a previous episode, for want of a better description, and the little girl goes, okay, well, you remember when you went to the magic castle, for the sake of argument. If you look at some instances of ChatGPT, it'll turn around and go, what are you talking about? So do you have that sort of reference to the past?
We do, but we control where it's applied. So we found early on when we were doing that kind of thing, very quickly everything can get tangled, especially if it's a child making the story. They're trying out a lot of different things, so they might have themselves as an astronaut, and then the next week they want to have themselves as a cowboy. So to some extent, we have to reset all of the memory each time, otherwise it gets a little bit confusing. But one of the learnings we had, and one of my favorite features as probably biggest power user of the app. When you get to the end of a story, you can click continue story, and it generates a whole new story that's sort of like a sequel. And that one's really important, especially if you're reading the story as a bedtime and you get to the end, maybe the kid is still awake. Yeah, you hit continue story and you can keep going until they're asleep.
And how are you making sure that the content that is coming out is age appropriate?
So we have a couple of different factors on that. So on one side, we have very strict moderation rules. I think most of the tech that we've built ourselves is actually on moderating the stories. So we have functions that look at the prompts that go in and the story that comes out, just to make sure that no one's, trying to put something nefarious in to start with.
People will try this sort of thing all the time, won't they?
Yes.
Or even, big brothers and sisters might come along and try and be a bit naughty.
Yeah. And to some extent, we let it in. Like, I think I was looking at a story generated yesterday where someone calls their brother a poo-poo head. And, we let that kind of thing fly, but there's
I won't have to bleep that, which is the good news. So okay, maybe I might bleep that. Who knows?
But we also have a strict control over what comes out. So a lot of parents have told us, particularly a year ago when AI was more of a nascent thing, they told us that they were a bit worried about AI, and they were particularly worried if they were to give the app to a kid and that the parent himself wasn't seeing the story before the kid read it. So we have strict controls over the story that comes out. We scan through, make sure that there's no controversial themes or themes that are age inappropriate. So that's a big part of what we do. We also have age personalization. So making sure that if the child is probably around 4 to 6, the complexity of the story, the vocabulary, the grammar is a lot more simple than if it was a 13-year-old generating the story.
Yeah. And does the system have knowledge of the outside world? So, for instance, you're in Mexico City at the moment, and let's say that your daughter Scarlett was to say, "I'm in Mexico City." Would it then have even a concept of what that location is and potentially blend it into the story?
Yeah, absolutely. So we find that one of the biggest use cases is parents will make a story about the day that the kid has just had or the day that they're about to have. So they go to the dentist or they're visiting their grandma in a particular location. So yeah, it can incorporate a lot of these things just to make sure that these stories are fresh and innovative each day and not the same old kind of fairy tale that's been retold thousands of times.
So you mentioned there something that I thought was very interesting. The idea of, well, the kid's got to go to the dentist, and obviously this can be a little scary. Does the parent have the opportunity to go into the system and get it to generate a story about how going to the dentist isn't scary, and maybe the little friends that the child's created within the story will say, "Hey, yeah, I went and it was all good."
Yeah, exactly. So we have the option for a custom moral or custom learning, and a lot of that is used for. The biggest use case there is the kid is scared of something or apprehensive. First day of school, making new friends, etc.
Yeah.
We also find that parents are using it for things like potty training, or for. In the case of my daughter, right now she happens to bite a couple of her friends at school every now and again, so we often put that into the story.
Very interesting. So it sounds like it's a very powerful tool to help guide the child and support the parent.
Yes, yeah. So we try and balance things a lot between the parent as the user and the child as the user, and that depends a lot on the age of the child. So we're currently working a lot on catering the stories from anywhere from newborns up to around a 13, 14-year-old.
Very interesting. And has it progressed beyond the parent-child relationship to the point where maybe you have a kindergarten teacher and they want to write a story about the class of kids that they've got?
Yeah, absolutely. So schools are very big users as well. We are about to launch a B2B version of the app, which is us selling to schools so that they can use there. A lot of that is in language learning. So the app is available internationally, and because of how good AI is at the moment. We can generate stories in 75 languages. So language learning is a big one. Early on, we worked with a lot of teachers to understand what they would want from a story, and just having the personalization really increases the engagement of the child in the story. So, it's a case of learning French from a textbook or learning French from a story about yourself. So it helps a lot.
I find it great that you were working with a lot of teachers in the early days, and I'm assuming you still are. Are there any particular educational standards that you're trying to adhere to? Is there some science, some studies that you're using to help form the style of content that you're delivering?
Yeah, so we use the, I think it's the US standard reading levels. So those are the ones that sort of set out the kinds of vocabulary, narrative, grammar that kids should be reading at different age levels. So that was a big part of our age customization. Same for language learning. We have I think it's the European educational levels of like A1, A2, A3, etc. So we often put these in directly into the generation, so it's context that the AI has when they generate stories. And then as we develop new features, teachers are a big sort of source of knowledge, or a big user group that we test with.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And so, from what I'm hearing, one of the main concerns that people have about AI and creativity may be kind of dealt with here, in that a lot of people are worried about AI books going on Amazon and people just churning out book after book after book, and it loses its soul, it loses its personality. This seems like it's a much more focused one-to-one or one to not too many scenario.
Exactly, yeah. So we definitely don't want to replace, traditionally written books that are written for wider audiences. We're intending for this more to be a supplement to that in cases where you need fresh content in high volume, or in cases where you need personalization to drive engagement.
Interesting.
So my daughter has a lot of books outside of Scarlett Panda.
I'm sure she does. The type of content that gets generated, does it just come up on an app, or is the opportunity to maybe order a paper-based version, say a Christmas special or something like that?
So for a long time, we just had the app. We have a number of different formats in there, ranging from short stories to long form stories, choose your own adventure stories, and even customized meditations. And recently, we ran a small pilot over Christmas of printed books as gifts. It took a little bit of a pivot, because we went from selling to parents and schools to selling to grandparents and uncles and people that were buying as gifts. But that's now something that's very widely available. We've just started a sort of spin-off product called Storybooks, which is long-form content around about 5,000 words. And the idea there is that you can get a PDF, you can read it on a Kindle, or you can print it out and send it as a gift.
Fantastic. So when you're creating these stories, or when the system is creating these stories, do you ever get requests to help with, say, some of the more challenging topics that are out there? So maybe medical issues, or if the child is, experiencing some level of abuse.
Yes, yeah. I personally, as the CTO, I read through a lot of the stories just to make sure that the moderation is working. So I do see a lot of the stories being written, and yeah, you're right. We do have stories where the parent is using the story as a medium to teach a very tough lesson. One example that comes to mind is there was a parent whose mother had dementia. And she was really struggling to explain this to the child. So she used the app, and the story generator sort of explains to the child like why the grandmother is getting forgetful, why she can maybe not remember a couple of things that have happened in the story, but it spins it in a way that the child can understand. So there's a lot of explain like I'm five kind of narrative in there. And it also presents it in a much more positive light. So making sure that the child is receptive, but not harmed or anything by the information.
That makes a lot of sense. And do you have any flags. So if the child starts to write about a story of maybe some bad things that are happening to them, that there's an alert that goes off somewhere, be it to their parent or guardian, or maybe even somewhere else.
Yes. So our moderation system will our moderation system categorizes the inputs as well as the outputs on a number of these factors. So things like abuse,
Mhm,
things like hate, discrimination, etc.,
mhm,
etc.
mhm.
These all land in my inbox directly. So anything like this that happens, we review. Thankfully, it hasn't ever come up where this has happened, but we're prepared in case it does.
It's great that you've got that preparation there because it probably is only a question of time, which leads me to the next question. I mean, it sounds like you've got a wonderful service. I mean, what sort of numbers are we talking? Can you give me an idea of how successful it's been in what must be a very, very short amount of time?
Yeah, so we have around 500 customers on the app,
Mhm.
on the subscription side. And with the print books, which we actually only released this last weekend, on that side we have 8 customers. So very small, but yeah, we're hoping to grow it a lot faster soon.
Great. You mentioned earlier on as well, there's a sort of a cutoff around the 13 years old stage. Do you have plans for equivalent services for ages above 13 or maybe even adult readers?
Yes, so we cut it off at 13 at the moment, just because that's where we found the interest level to drop off a little bit in this kind of story. So we often talk a lot to our users just to find out how what they think about the stories. And we find that with teenagers, they're not really, they don't really feel the magic of themselves being in a story anymore. So they're more looking to read more serious fiction,
Mhm.
um, things that their friends are reading as opposed to just things that they're reading. So we've kind of left that alone at the moment. We have plans to go back there later on. I think the current plan is to go there with graphic novels as opposed to text novels. But yeah, we right now we're focused more on the younger base of 0 to 13,
And you
and then
mentioned
on
there, so go ahead.
adults, on adults we have had a lot of adults using the app as well, but it's yeah they're more using it as a gimmick as opposed to building a habit around it. So
No,
we let them do it, but but
no,
it's
I
more of how
understand. I understand. They're going to play, they're going to try things out, which is great
yeah.
news. So, as people have been using this, have you found that they've quickly gotten over the concern that you raised earlier on of, hey, I'm going to leave my child alone with an AI, with all the
Yes.
negatives that some people have in their mind?
Yeah. So we mostly had those kind of concerns raised to us probably around a year ago, when AI was a very nascent tech. Recently, we found parents embracing it like much more. You know, parents have been using ChatGPT themselves. They've been
Mhm,
using other AI products. So I think that people are starting to warm up to the idea of AI writing stories. Plus, you know, we've communicated a lot about our moderation
mhm.
and yeah, so we haven't really had those concerns recently, but um, yeah, if they come up, we're prepared to to respond.
Which is great to know. And have you had any instances where this might be the first example where the parent, the adult, is consciously using AI and it's made them more comfortable with maybe using ChatGPT or any of the other services that are out there?
Yeah, so we found some parents early on were using our app to sort of refine their prompting skills.
Okay. So prompt
So particularly
engineering through Scarlett Panda.
yeah. So we like particularly like a year ago when we just started, we were using models that were a little bit required more effort and more work to get a good story. So we were releasing guides about how to prompt, how to communicate with AI. So I think that helped parents come around to the idea. Recently, we've been trying to more just make it a lot easier for parents to use it. So we try and make sure that the app doesn't look like ChatGPT or anything like that.
That's cool. But as you say, if it's given people that first taste of AI, it's not scary. Maybe it helps them in other parts of their life as well.
Yeah. And I think people are a lot more forgiving about AI generated content now as well. Like early on, we had a lot of people getting in touch about, our dog is a different color in this image compared to what
Ah,
we
yeah.
said in the post. But recently, people are a bit more like, well, I'm just amazed that it happened in 10 seconds.
Well, that
I
is a
couldn't.
very, very cool thing indeed. So it sounds like you've done this amazing piece of work where you've taken something from the professional world and with a few tiny tweaks, it has suddenly become an amazing product for parents and children, which is, a wonderful thing to say how we can use AI in creative ways. My question to you would be then, based on everything that you've learned from doing that and the results that you've seen, especially with children and parents, what's that one piece of advice that you would want people to take away from our conversation today?
I think the main piece of advice I would say is, well, more for people who want to work in the AI industry,
Mhm.
so building products with AI. I would say that right now everything is so competitive, and everyone is using pretty much the same models. So to differentiate yourself, you have to find, you have to pick something about your personality or your core or your experience and throw that into the product, as opposed to just building another GPT wrapper. So for me, it was building something for my daughter and then using that every day to tell her stories, and learning and building through my own experiences. But we do find that competitors pop up. I think very early on, the idea of generating children's stories was kind of an obvious use case of GPT. So we had a lot of competitors at the start, but a lot of them, particularly the ones where they don't, like, the founders don't have kids themselves, like they kind of drop out of the race, or
Just in
they
it for
end
a
up
quick
building.
buck, basically.
Yeah. So I would say, to differentiate yourself from everyone else who's using GPT-4, throw something of your own personality in there.
That sounds really, really like great advice. So, Ellis, thank you for that today. Where can people find you and Scarlet Panda, and what other exciting projects have you got that they should be looking at?
So you can find me at Twitter with the handle Ellis Crosby. Scarlett Panda you can find at scarlettpanda.com. Or if you're looking for our storybooks feature, that would be storybooks.scarlettpanda.com. And I think storybooks is probably our big exciting feature right now. So it's long form content. We've put a lot of work into making sure that the story works over a length of 5,000 characters. The images are looking good and consistent. We have audiobooks, we have print books. So I think that's the one I'm most excited about right now.
Well, it sounds fantastic, and I wish you the best of luck because it sounds like you've got something which is going to really help parents and grandparents and lots of other people going forward.
I hope so.
Well, that's a wrap on another awesome guest episode for the Evolvepreneur AI Advantage Show. Just before you go, if you like this episode, we would be very grateful for a 5-star review. Please also consider recommending the show to a friend or two. Make sure you subscribe for future episodes at aiadvantage.show right now. Until next time, I'm Richard Wray, and if you're an entrepreneur, get the AI advantage today.